Tonight's symposium is called 20 Years of Gold. It is celebrating the 20th anniversary of the gilding project to add gold leaf to Athena Parthenos. So I'm delighted to present Micki and Mitch Cavanah from Reed's Gold Leaf. And for more than 30 years, they have been perfecting the fine tradition of gilding and coordinating with other gilders and craftsmen from related fields to ensure the mutual preservation of the art form of antique and frame restoration. They are expert gilders and were involved with the project that added gold and paint to the statue of Athena Parthenos in the Naos over the summer of 2002. So Mitch and Micki, I will turn it over to you. I know they have some pictures to share, so we'll give them a minute to share their screen. And away we go.
First of all, what we're going to talk about is how we got into the craft of gilding. Early in the 1970s, my parents opened a frame shop, and in the mid 70s, one of my mom's clients, he was an interior designer here in Nashville, told her that he was taking his gilding work to Atlanta to be done, and asked if she could do that. Well, my mother was the kind of person that rarely said no to anything, and she said, "Sure, I can do it." And so even though she had no idea what she was talking about and what she was doing, and you have to remember back then in the 70s, there was no internet, there was no sharing of information like that. And even most old school gilders at that time were very reluctant to share information about the gilding process. And some of them were very secretive about their formulas for gesso and bowl and that sort of thing. I talked to another gilder who once told me she worked for one of these old school gilders, and he made her go in a closet when he made these formulas so she wouldn't know what he was doing. Well, finally, she found a book that was very old about gilding, and much of the process in gilding has to do with rabbit skin glue. So the recipe in this book had instructions, and it said, okay, go out and find a rabbit and skin it and get its pelt and make rabbit skin glue. Well, that pretty much kind of did her in for a minute. She kind of broke down at that point, but finally she found some help and found out that she could purchase rabbit skin glue pellets and make the rabbit skin glue that she needed. So the beginning was kind of a trial and error, and she was kind of self-taught at that point from her resources she found, but then eventually she did find other gilders that were willing to teach, such as Peter Crafts and Marty Horowitz and some others. So I was around for all of the beginnings of that process and watched her and my dad stay up in the wee hours of the night finishing gilding projects that had to be completed, because a lot of the process has a timing issue. It has to be done right when the size comes to tack. So about 10 years later, she took on a large project. It was for Vanderbilt University, restoring a number of their antique frames. Mostly they were portrait frames for the deans and such. So she asked Mitch to help her, and that's where he was introduced into the gilding project, and that's where he started. Early in the early 90s, Alan LeQuire contacted Mom and asked her about gilding, helping out with the gilding on the frieze on the newly installed Athena sculpture. So she and Mitch started doing tests on, Alan provided some pieces that we could do tests on, and Mitch is showing this is actually a piece of the trim that you see on the base of the Athena sculpture there. We still have a piece of that. And so they did some tests and came up with a plan to do the gilding. Most of it was off-site for the frieze pieces, but the pieces like the trim that he just showed had to be done on location. So the frieze was gilded early on. So, but that's basically the way she looked from that point until 2002, with the frieze and the ornamental elements gilded, and Athena was white for about 10 years. So all along, the plan for Athena was, from their research, to make her look like the original Athena sculpture. And the original was that she was gilded as best that they could come up with they did research to find out how she supposedly looked. So that was the plan from early on. A lot of people thought that she was done when the frieze was done and she was erected, but there was a plan. So around 2001, Alan contacted my mom again, and her name, by the way, is Lou Reed, and to ask her if she could head up the gilding part of the project. And she knew that it had been coming up, that they were going to do this, but the magnitude of the project was really intimidating to her at that time. She knew that she would need a team of people, younger than her, of course, to do the work. And honestly, there were not many people locally who were familiar with this type of gilding on this kind of scale. So she thought that she was going to have to ship in gilders from all corners of the United States that would fit the budget, but that would not fit the budget. So needless to say, she was a bit apprehensive about the whole project. Well, Alan talked with her again about the project, and he suggested a plan to gather a group of artists and craftspeople to train to do the work. We had more than enough people apply to do the work. We had some small gilding projects for them to do to see how well they followed instructions and how well they handled the leaf. So we came up with about 10 to 12 to make up this team. So at that point, we scheduled the work to begin and jumped right in. So this is where our other panelist, Margaret, came in. Margaret was one of the staples of our team, and we have to give credit where credit is due, because Margaret had enough forethought to document the entire project from start to finish, and that's why we have a record of it to share with you today. Her documentation is where the rest of this presentation is going to take. Most of the photos are hers, and the comments and thoughts are from her perspective. And I'm very thankful that Margaret did this, because had she not, at this point, I would have to just tell you there was gold. We put it on Athena, and it was done. But we have good documentation about that. So now we're going to start with some photographs about the project. And Margaret was great. She did it week by week. She documented this week by week. And so this is the first photo that we have. Margaret was on this crew of 10 people. Work began on June 3rd, 2002. The first steps we had to do is had to clean her and scrub off all the dirt that had accumulated over the years. And there was one of the biggest problems I remember is that there was a lot of bird poop on the top of her. So that had to be cleaned off. Also, they had to clean off any waxy film from the casting release agent, and it was sanded and given the surface was a fine tooth after it was sanded. And then of course, it had to be vacuumed after that. So all of those steps took a long time too. After the cleaning was complete, we began to brush on shellac, starting at the very top and working our way down. 3 coats of shellac were applied, and then the size would be applied to that after the shellac was done. And basically the shellac was done because otherwise the surface of the sculpture was a bit porous. So if you put your size on that directly, it would have soaked in and none of the leaf would stick to it. So when I talk about size is the medium, that's the tacky medium that holds the gold to the surface. And that's what that is. So the gold comes in little books. If you've never seen it before, it's usually 25 sheets to a book. The sheets measure about 3 1/4 inches. So it took about 8 pounds, a little over 8 pounds of gold to actually finish her. Also, another point that Margaret makes here, and I remember very well, and all of us remember that worked on it, there was no air conditioning in the Parthenon at that time. Even if there was airflow, it would not be good because it would blow the leaf around and it would be a problem with that. So of course, then it was done in the summertime. So the higher you go up, the hotter it is. And also, for safety, we of course had to wear harnesses, which was an extra added pain. So you'll see those in the photographs though coming up. And this is a shot of just a few of the crew. There's Margaret there in the center, and Smith Coleman on the right side, and a couple of the others over there. And we're just discussing the day. So the next photo, there's Alan himself, the sculpture. And here's what Margaret said about this. She said, without him, I and the rest of the gilding crew would not be working on this project, because there would be no big, beautiful statue of the goddess Athena in the Parthenon. So this is a picture of Alan. When you look up in the Parthenon to the ceiling, there's the grid work. Well, a lot of those places will come out because there's space above that they can drop ropes from. So he was attaching ropes that our harnesses would be attached to from this place in the ceiling. So here's some photographs. The next photo, it's couple photos. This is my mother, Lou Reed, which is standing down at the bottom in the bright red. And I think Margaret is right there behind her. So she's the one that trained everybody and headed up this project. And so, you know, credit to her. Unfortunately, she passed away in 2004. So this is a really nice memory for all of us, for my mom. So the next picture, here you can see she's up to her elbows and mixing red oil paint into the size. So the size is a light amber color. The size is made up mostly of linseed oil, and then it has dryers mixed in with that. The dryers are either for what's called fast size or slow size. Fast size will dry within about 3 hours. Slow size takes about 12 to 24 hours to come to tack. So the slow size is much more reliable. So that's why we use the slow size. And so what she's doing here, we have to mix red oil paint in with the size, because if we just put the size directly on the shellacked surface, you wouldn't be able to see where it was. So we have to have a visual to see how much gilding will be done and where the gilding will be done. So it's done, this was done in batches. And I remember her sitting there making batches of size a lot, because it's done it's mixed by hand using a piece of glass and a razor blade to mix the things, because both of these things are very thick. But she got the job done. So the next photograph is a look at Athena's helmet and spear. The helmet is very detailed and ornate, and there's a sphinx in the center. That's kind of hard to say, a sphinx in the center, flanked on either side by a winged horse. There's also 2 earpieces slanting out and adorned with griffins. Getting to all of these little areas, as you can see, is really tricky. And there's a spear point that you have to work around. So it was a lot of contortion being done during this process. So that was the first week. Now we go to week 2. And you can see the progress here. 3 coats of shellac are being applied to all the areas to be gilded. We started at the top, as you can see, and the lower levels have only 1 or 2 coats so far. After the shellac is good and dry, we apply the size, and that's what the gold leaf will stick to. The shellac will seal as I mentioned before, will seal the surface and prevent the size from being absorbed. And then the size is let dry overnight. So obviously we can't put on more size than we have hands to lay leaf the next day. So we have to kind of figure out how much leaf can be laid in one day and not do more size than what we can do leaf the next day. The lower shot, this is a shot of Athena's foot. So this is showing the size of it. This is Margaret's hand on her foot. And obviously she's wearing these platform sandals that have little bas reliefs on the front of them. And we had to shellac around those reliefs. You can see it just at the very bottom there. And the next picture, I think, is the necklace. Yeah, this is her necklace and earrings with 3 coats of amber shellac. Also, you can see the breastplate, and you can see the Medusa head there at the bottom left on the breastplate. So we'll get into the painting a little bit more here in a minute. So the next picture is, this is Luke, and he's putting gold leaf on the sized back, on Athena's back. So you can see where the red is where there is size, and the gold is just shellac. It hasn't been sized yet. So what he's using there is called a gilder's tip. It's a brush that's a wide brush, about 3 inches wide, and that's what picks the leaf up out of the book. You can see the leaf is in his left hand, and you have to just very carefully pick it up. If there's any wind around, it'll blow it right out of your hand. So it's kind of a hold your breath sort of a process that you have to do, and you have to remember. Then later on, a lot of times when I'm gilding, I have to remember to breathe, and I have to turn away so I can breathe and then go back to my work. And then what we do after the leaf is laid, we come back with another brush to mop it down, to kind of tamp it down. And then after that, we will brush it again to get the loose pieces off, the little loose bits, which are called skewings. And so the leaf is overlapped, usually around 1/8 or 1/4 inch on each sheet. But you can see how many sheets it's going to take, because you can see pretty well there the size of the sheet in relationship to the huge sculpture. Okay, the next photograph, this is Smitty. He's applying gold leaf to the Sphinx on Athena's helmet. There's still one more level above this, and it's again really hot, 40 feet up. Also, Margaret mentioned about the scaffolding. Is so true. The scaffolding kind of sways like a tree house, so that's a little unnerving sometimes. So there's a lot to do on the helmet. Really, you can't see the helmet and appreciate it from the floor as much as detail is in there. So it's an amazing thing. Besides the Sphinx, there's 2 winged horses with long plumes that extend 3 levels of scaffolding. And the next photograph, here I am at the top of Athena. I think there's actually 1 level above me too. That's after the gilding is done and before the face is painted. So that's what she looked like before the painting. So now we go to week 3, and this is a really good shot showing all the layers. The snake is shellacked, and under his head you can see the red size around the white coils on the shield there. And then you can see the parts of the shield that are gilded. So that shows all those different layers. The coils will be painted ivory, and Alan is going to paint a scene on the inside surface. Okay, next one you can see, here's a good shot of the sandals. Here it is with the size on the sandals at the bottom, and you see the bas relief that's around the sandals. And then the next shot you see with them gilded and how bright it is and how amazing they look. I love the sandals. I think the sandals are great. I wish somebody would make those sandals. Okay, in the next photograph. So this is Micki. And she has been gilded. She's holding a laurel leaf victory crown for Athena here. The laurel crown there that she's holding is made out of cut metal. And so that was very intricate to get all of the gold and all of those little pieces and parts too. So now we go to week 4. Here we worked on the gilding on the 2nd level as well as the shield. The rest of the week, though, the paint crew worked on her skin and other areas to be painted without having the gilding people clamoring all around. So there's only so much space, so they needed some space and some time to do that. So the next picture is a picture of the shield. It's kind of hard to see because there's a glare and there's lights that are focused on there, and then there's the scaffolding to go around. But you can see most of the shield is gilded there. There's a lot of detail and bas relief figures of the Amazons battling. There's, as Margaret put it in her description, there's a lot of hair grabbing, somebody with a big rock lifted over their head, fleeing pursuits. So there's lots of action to see in there if you've ever studied it. And there's, of course, always Medusa there in the middle of the shield. So now we go to week 5, and this is Jean, another one of our gilders, and she's checking Nike and rubbing down the gold. Above and below Athena's snake belt, you can see the shellac above and the red size that it's waiting to have the gilding done on it. Athena also has, if you can see over there closer to where Jean is, she has bracelets on both wrists, which are coiled snakes. So they're pretty awesome too. Next picture is cool. Athena gets her eyelashes. This is what her eyelashes looked like before they were gilded. They were cut out of copper and then we gilded them. Her eyes are being painted. Here they just have a paper cutouts. Athena's face is further developed by Alan, and Margaret says he seems to have a flair for makeup, as he did, and her eyes have been painted in, as well as her lips and nostrils, and it's a really beautiful color that they came up with on her skin. And Jenny Gill was on the painting crew that helped with that as well. So now we go to week 6, and Athena is now covered with gold herself. All that's left to be gilded is the serpent and the rest of the spear shaft. There's still a lot of work to be done, but now we do the process. We go to the process of rubbing down the gold with ice water and cotton, and this gets rid of any of the gold fuzz or the skewings that may still be hanging around, because they will stay on there. It's where the sheets of gold overlap each other. So the first layer sticks, the second layer will come off. And so we use the ice water to do that. And then we also have to carefully inspect it to see if there's any touch-ups needed, because inevitably there's going to be either missed spots or things that have been scuffed up that we have to take care of. So the next photo, we can see work beginning on the snake. Getting to the snake is like a puzzle. We have to figure out which parts to do first so that we won't be crawling around and leaning on the gilding areas. So that's pretty tricky. It's like a puzzle there. Like I said, there are many tight spots. Next picture is, here I am at the backside bottom of the snake, putting leaf on the snake there. All right, the next photo, here's Margaret. She is working on the eyelashes. She's painting the red size on her eyelashes and eyebrows. And the blue tape is, of course, under there to prevent the size from going onto her skin, which has already been painted. And once again, she mentions how hot and humid it is so high up there. So the next picture is her with her golden eyelashes. It's quite stunning. And there's a faint blush on her cheeks, which is really beautiful. And she's been given more terracotta on the shade of her lips. Athena is called the gray-eyed goddess, and her eyes are an amazing color of blue-gray. Once she's finished and the scaffolding comes down, nobody will be able to see this beautiful close-up of her face anymore. And that's very true. So we're privileged that we were able to see it that close up. So now we go to week 7. We're still busy looking over everything over and over again, rubbing down the gold with cotton and ice water, and gilding any tiny spots that may have been missed the first time around. We had to redo several areas that may have gotten scratched or scuffed up in tight spots. And it's painstaking work, but we have to watch it very closely. We need keen eyes and an outlook of making this as perfect as possible. We pay as much attention to the areas that will not be even visible to anyone, such as this one. This is the kind of the top back part of Nike, and I don't know if anybody will ever see that at all. We will know that this gives a great feeling of pride and satisfaction to us all. And as Margaret mentioned on her documentation, of course, Athena will outlast all of us. So here's one more view that no one will see. So the next photo is, okay, this is an interesting photo. Remember back a few photos ago, you saw it with the size on the bottom and the shellac on the top. Well, now she has the gold on her dress above and below. Notice, here's the thing. Notice how the gold throws a glow onto the underside of the scaffolding at the top of the picture. Point to that scaffolding up there. See that? It looks like there's a light shining up there. So this actually demonstrates why frames that were built many years ago were so wide, and how that their profiles extended out. And this was done on purpose because it would reflect light back into the painting, back in a time when there was not much light in the places that they were, like these old dark castles and such. But it just shows the amazing reflective quality of gold. So the next pictures, this is the serpent, and it's getting more leaf. This is Charlie on the lower level, and the foot that you see up above belongs to Dennis. You can go to the next photo, and he's at the top. So you can see how we're all intertwined and around everything, trying to get to every angle. Luke's on the last picture. Luke was on the other side of the shield. So now we go to week 8. This is Susan and Luke brushing excess gold off of the snake. Luke is getting covered with gold flakes. Go the next picture. Which demonstrates how well gold sticks to sweaty, sticky skin. And he was covered by the time he left there that day. He was worth a lot more money that day than he probably ever has been. So the next, this is week 9, and here's Margaret. After we spent all morning wrapping the snake, it was very hot. She was very tired, and the wrapping was very comfy looking. So the reason we had to do this was to protect the gold from getting scuffed up. Alan would start painting the shield soon, and it would be all but impossible to get to it without bumping into the snake. So we had to protect it, and that worked really well. So as you can see here behind Margaret, the shield, it doesn't have any of the painting on it yet. So they have a lot of work to do on that. So now we're up to week 11. Last week we hit everything with canned air. That's another thing we do to get the loose gold skewings off of the gilded surfaces. There's always more gold dust. Even when you think you've gotten it all, it's always more. So at this point, Lou has given the go-ahead to re-gild the figures at the base. As you remember, I said back in the 1990s, when Athena was originally installed, this was gilded. But at that time, there were no barriers around it, and the figures got scuffed and scraped up really badly. So now they'll look as good as Athena does, because we will have re-gilded the trim and the frieze and all of that area after that. And this is Charlie and myself doing the skewings. So the next picture. Okay, this is really nice too. It's something you may not ever see or may not be able to see. The painting crew has been working on the painting, and Alan has gotten more of Athena's ornamentation and getting color on that. This picture shows the edge design of the helmet plumes. It's getting accented with red and blue and that little tiny trim. And this is another element that you probably can't see so much from the ground, but next time you go, take a look up at it. You may have to take some binoculars and take a look at that, because it's really beautiful too, just the little details in there. So now we're at week 12. This is Pandemonium week. The sounds of the scaffolding is starting to come down. It's incredibly loud and nerve-wracking. Slabs of metal, flooring dropping with a bang, wrenches screeching against pipe, and we're all sitting around watching these pipes swing through the air so close to her. Everybody it's hard to even watch, because we're thinking it's going to hit at any time. But they did a wonderful job. So soon the reason that we're working so hard is, once the scaffolding is down, we won't be able to get back to it again. So we have to make sure it's all done well. we've already lost access to her head and helmet at this point. So we are have our dust care. You can see the woman in the front here. She has her can of dust air and she's getting more skewings off. That's Luke and Allison working there. And there's Nike watching in the background. So the next photo, here's Alan and the painting crew making a few last minute changes too. It's amazing how semi-frantic people were up on the same level of scaffolding at one time. And we were all still able to get the work done. And because everybody was focused on Athena. Mitch was quality control on the gilding part of it. As the scaffolding was removed, he checked for any losses and re-gild spots. So the next photo is of the scaffolding guys. These were the guys that had installed the scaffolding and now they were taking it down and they have a nice little break. At this point, this is the first that we have seen from the floor of Athena's face. So when the scaffolding was up, when you were standing on the floor, you could not see her face. So it was pretty amazing to see that at that point. And the next photo too, I think. Yeah, and there it is with all the scaffolding down. And this is, the serpent is still covered with some of the wrapping. It looks like it's had a bit of an accident, but she's okay. She's still sitting there. And it just is fabulous. So week 13, next photo. Okay, here's Jenny and Alan at work. Margaret is painting too. They're on ladders there. They're doing outlines of the figures after we paint them in. After they paint them in, Alan is doing the outlines after they paint them in. Charlie and Jenny and Margaret are painting. After inspecting all of the shield, Alan declared the painting was finished. So this is Margaret's words here from her documentation. I thought it was really, really great. It was a long week. I was really tired, but when I drove off, I suddenly felt so sad that it was over. I went home and didn't quite know what to do with myself. I'm sure I'll get over that feeling. Just tonight, I feel kind of empty, but it really looks great. Alan added an owl for Athena. It's flying towards her from inside the shield handle. I love it. And I love hearing Alan tell the stories, working on this with him. Those crazy gods, giants, Amazons, they're alive all around you and battling away. We will come back on Tuesday, varnish the shield interior, unwrap the snake, and repair any damage on the gold. We have to do a thorough cleanup too. The big opening party is Thursday, so the week will be hectic. I thought that was a really nice quote there. So the next picture on week 14, we're going into week 14 now. And this is the unwrapped snake. And it had some just minor repairs. We did a good cleaning around the base. We were still working on it Thursday, the day of the opening party, just to clean up any little things that had to be done. And so the next picture, the work is done. Here is the party. The Parthenon patrons came and everybody who did work on Athena. It was a beautiful night. And this is just beautiful. She has a little bit of dust on her now, but she was just brilliant. And let's see, everybody was milling around the outside of the big bronze doors, sipping wine and waiting to see Athena clothed in gold. The mayor had a little talk, and you can see him. I don't think. That's him, right? Yeah, there he is. So finally, the doors opened and everyone came in. Everyone oohed and awed at how beautiful she looked. There was much praise for Alan, for Lou, and the whole crew. We were all very proud of what we had done there. And the last picture here, this is Margaret and Alan in front of Our Lady, Athena. And then the celebration comes to an end. And we leave knowing that we can come back again and again to visit her. She is ours, and Athena shines on, even as the lights are dimmed at the Parthenon. So that's the photos that we have.
That was great, Micki. I mean, just for me, having worked on it, I mean, it was just amazing to just to see, the whole process again, 20 years later. And I guess, I really like that you focused on the top of the shield, because I remember I actually went up in the ceiling, like that one shot of Alan looking down, and I took that picture of the top of her head, because I kept realizing all these, shots that no one would ever see. You can't see them from the floor. But we were, we were told, and I think we wanted to do those areas just as good as the areas you could see, as a point of pride. So that's something, that I do remember. And also Nike, the thing about Nike too was, since she's out on Athena's, arm, she had her own little scaffolding around, which was not connected to anything else. And to get to her was really tricky. That was really like being in a little bird's nest. And one other thing, when I was doing the eyelashes, but then the brows, Alan had just like made a little pencil line, for each brow. And so I'm up there and her head is so big that I could only see one brow at a time, right? So I had to size a curve, and then go on the other side and size, a curve. But I was like, are they going to be, crooked or something, but they turned out perfectly. So that was just pure luck. But that was something. It was, Lou chose me to go up there, and it was considered an honor to do that part, and it was a little scary, but I was really honored to do it, and and it was just everything, all the steps you talked about. I just remember everything had to be so clean and perfect, and but it was so worth it. And again, at the end, when the people came, I also remember thinking, this could just be like in Greece way back then, except for the difference in our clothes and hairdos, but we're all just people milling around, and there's Athena, and I remember feeling that. And I'm just so glad that I made that. I had gotten my first digital camera, and so I was like, oh, I'm gonna, take pictures from a worker's point of view. And I would take pictures, and then I guess I would go home and download them on my computer. And I was into making my own website at the time. So I was all into it. It was a lot of fun for me. It was a lot of work, but it was a lot of fun. And to know that it's lasted and it's still relevant for our memories, is, I'm just so happy. So, happy to have been included. And Lou was wonderful. Seeing that picture of her, I remember taking that picture of her all with her red. And just to sit there and smell all that stuff too. And it was like, well, you can't put too much oil because it'll make it longer for it to come to tax. So it was she had to just put enough, and it was all, we didn't really appreciate what she did. And when she came to the party, I remember she had this actual leaf that was gold, like a necklace, and that was her gold leaf. And I just thought that was really cute too. So I guess that's all I have to say. You never know when you're doing something how amazing it is till later on, and then you look back and you're like, yeah, I was part of that, and so that's about all I have to say.
That's incredible. Thank you so much for sharing, both Mitch and Micki and Margaret. We do have some questions coming in the chat and in the Q&A box. So I will start asking those. But consider this, our audience tonight, your invitation to add questions, comments, thoughts, anything you're wondering. I know I already have my list of things I want to ask, but I will be patient and make sure we get some visitor questions answered first. So our first question is going to come from the chat tonight. And Judy Petroli asks, how hard is it to get the gold leaf off when you get it on your skin and clothes?
Yeah, it washes off pretty well, pretty easily. Margaret knows we went away from there with more gold on us. When I'm working day to day in my shop, we do a lot of antique frame restoration, and we'll go to lunch or somewhere, and I'll look down and I'll have like gold on my arm, or Mitch will say, oh, you've got some gold on your face there. So I mean, it's so lightweight, you don't know it's there until you see it, but you know, it comes off very easily.
Yeah. And it was what, 23.75 gold.
Carat, exactly.
Carat gold. And I mean, we had the little boxes that the stacks of little gold leaf books came in, and we were like saving the skewings in case we might use them for touch up, you know. But I think I still have a box up in my place sometime. And when the guys at night would come to clean, you know, it's all the skewings that were on the floor, and they would ask, oh, is this real gold? And I'm like, oh yeah, you know, sweeping it up, you know, trying to save it.
Yeah.
We should have taken that trash and taken it to the refiner. Yeah.
We also have some really lovely comments from Wesley Payne and Mary Mark Monday about thanking you, Margaret, for your photo documentation and how special that is, sending their love as well. We're going to move on to a question from the Q&A, and we'll go back to the chat in just a minute. So feel free to keep posting any questions that you have in either place. We'll see them. We have a question from Jane Stein, who mentions they missed the first few minutes of the talk. When was the painting done, and how long did it take in total?
The painting of the painted part or the complete project?
Maybe you could answer the complete gilding project, and then if you have a sense of any of the paint aspects of it, the shield, the facial features, skin.
Yeah, it was, you know, it was, and Margaret knows this too, it was about 14 weeks.
Right, because when I was making the thing, I would put the weeks, you know, like week 1, week 2, so you get a sense that it was taking weeks.
Yeah. So of course the skin was painted first, and then all of the work on the shield, which is the highly decorated part. And, you know, part of the thing was we couldn't have people on top of each other. So we kind of had to shift out. And that one week that the gilders weren't there so much, that gave the painters more time to do that. So that's the way, you know, that was done. So, yeah.
And actually the frieze was done in the early 90s. The original, which of course, as Micki mentioned, it got a little scuffed up, you know, along the way. But so altogether, you got several years of work that went into it. Yeah.
Yeah.
And mostly we were doing this, like Micki said, in the heat of the summer. But a good portion of the people on the crew were teachers who were on vacation, summer vacation, you know. So as the summer went on, towards the end of the summer, we weren't quite done, not with the painting or anything, and they had to leave and go back to school. And I could stay. I didn't care. I'd stay, whatever.
And we're glad.
Yes, exactly.
Our next question is going to come from the Q&A. And the question is for everybody. Maybe this project was an influence or maybe not, but the question is, who is your favorite Greek god or goddess?
Well, it has to be Athena.
Right? Yeah, really.
Question.
So she is the goddess of war strategy, I believe, correct? Yeah.
Yes.
And that's basically because she's the one we know so much about.
Yeah.
You know, there's only so much time to learn about these things, and we learned a lot about her. And so she's got to be my favorite for sure.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know much about Greek mythology or anything myself. So like I said, listening to Alan, I would ask Alan, what's this? You know, what's going on? And he would tell stuff. And that was, I really, enjoyed that.
And there was a lot of work that went into, I remember talking to him about that they consulted with historians and archaeologists. And there was a lot of work that went into finding out what she really looked like. And that's the best that they could do on that.
And actually, towards the end of the project, a few groups, as you'll remember, showed up and togas and just kind of hanging around the large doors, just at the top of the stairs. They would just kind of,
Yeah,
hung
we met
around there.
some visitors like that. Yeah.
they were into it. They would have known about all the Greek gods, I'm sure.
That's wonderful. I'll add Athena's got to be my second. My top favorite Greek god is Asclepius, the god of healing and medicine. He's kind of a lesser known guy. Athena has some of the coolest things though, wisdom, war strategy, textiles, weaving, arts and crafts. She's a busy one.
She's
And
good.
a good favorite, that's for sure.
She's well-rounded then, isn't she?
Yes. All right, we are going to move to the chat for our next question. The question is, what kind of upkeep is needed on the gold leaf? Will it need to be redone at some point in the future?
Hopefully not in our lifetime. But as far as upkeep goes, the gold, when the size dries over the years, it hardens and it's very good. There's no sealer over top of the gold, which is best. It keeps it looking the best. The biggest problem, as you know, that they have is dust on it. And I've worked with Wesley and I have talked about this for years about what's the best way to get the dust off of the top part. I believe they cleaned from about the waist down a while back. And I've suggested a few things that I thought might work. I mean, we had Wesley and I talk to people trying to get a lift in there. And there's a lot of logistic problems with just getting a lift inside the center of the Parthenon. So it's going to be tricky. But when I go and see her, the biggest place I see the dust is on her breastplate, and because that's kind of a level that goes out and it's going to collect the most dust. But I'm really glad that they were able to dust it from the bottom down. I think there may be some maybe air hoses drop down from the ceiling that might work. I don't know.
Well,
but
Mary Mark just wrote a comment asking, what about cleaning drones?
Yeah, we tried that. Wesley had some come in there and to check it out. I was so nervous. I was there and I was like, please don't crash it into her. But it's, they create a lot of wind, but it went as close as it could to her, and it didn't really result in a lot of cleaning there. So I don't know if that's going to be the solution, but that's a good thought.
I do remember the day that we tested an area, and I remember the result was it cleaned the outer layer of dust, but not the dust on the actual gold. And my recollection was that it looked like it was snowing inside the Parthenon that day because of the dust. So we did a cleaning on Athena's as high as we could reach with, I like to say, Metro Parks's tallest ladder. And we were able to reach to her belt. So at the current rate, that's cleaning once every 30 years, as thorough as possible. I mean, that's a wonderful question. It's an ongoing kind of project about ideas and ways to keep her. I mean, my first observation with some of your photos was how incredibly shiny and reflective
exactly
she still looks pretty good. But especially with the natural lighting from the door being open, I mean, it's incomparable what the result was in 2002.
Yeah, that's true.
If I could add one quick thing to that, Katie, and that is that not a whole lot is known about how much, depending on how long the dust sits on a given area, particularly a horizontal surface or, somewhat angled surface, whether it would cause any long-term issues. I don't think we've determined that it would. We have had many a frame that we've restored that sat in a coal heating atmosphere where coal soot magnified microscopically is like little shards, and it will embed in gold leaf. But dust, we don't really feel that that's an issue. And so if it could be gotten to at some point logistically, it could probably be done if it's done gently.
Yeah.
I'm going to interject a question of my own here before we keep returning to some others. The scaffolding, I mean, what an incredible project in itself. I want to know if visitors were shouting out to you, or was the Parthenon closed the whole time? Were people asking questions? Were people trying to climb up there and get a closer look? What was it like doing the project in the museum at the time?
I think it was closed.
I think it was too. I think towards the end, it opened up a little bit, right,
Yeah.
Margaret? Because I remember there being a few people there,
Yes.
but
right
they
at
had
the end.
barriers.
Yeah. And
They
I know
couldn't
one
get
of the
close.
questions was how many sheets of gold were put on her? And there was an answer. I can't remember it now. I wrote it down,
Yeah.
but it was,
It's a secret. It's a secret.
it was
Eight-
a lot.
Amazing number.
8 pounds is enough. And a lot of people also ask how thick gold leaf is. And the answer I will give you, there's a couple different scenarios. You can't measure the thickness of it because it's so thin. If you're able to hold up a sheet, you can actually see through it.
Yeah.
It
And
is.
you shouldn't ever, the reason you have those, the brushes, you shouldn't touch it with your fingers.
Yeah.
It'll just dissolve
Just
from the
disintegrates.
heat and moisture in your skin,
But one scenario that someone told me is that it takes 100 sheets of gold to equal a thickness of paper. Also, I'm a member of the Society of Gilders, and one of our members is a professor, and he's done a really great talk about gold and its origins and everything. And one of the things he mentioned on that, which is amazing to me, is that if you could hold a sheet of gold flat and make it flat, which you can't, to see the edge of it, the edge of the gold leaf, you couldn't see it because it's thinner than a ray of light. So
And
that puts it in perspective.
is the speculation that the original statue in Greece was covered in like sheets of gold hammered,
It had to be. It had to be
Yeah.
much
Yeah,
heavier.
no question.
Yes,
It
but
was-
I mean,
yeah.
it was actually Mhm.
Hammered into whatever relief was there. They would
Right,
tap it in and
right,
it-
because it is soft, even if it's thicker.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's,
Yeah.
it's the softest metal. And that's one of the reasons they use alloys in most gold. 24 karat leaf is very hard to work with because it's way too soft. That's why we use 23.75. It's 99% gold. And the rest of it is silver with a tiny bit of copper as an alloy in there. So
Yeah, the original was thicker plates of gold put up on a framework, but it is, very stable in that sense. So the amazing thing about finding gold at an archaeological site is it still looks like gold.
Yeah.
That's
exactly.
it.
Incredible.
That's
Exactly.
it.
And
all
that's
right.
another quality of gold that is inert, and it will, if it's there, it will always be gold.
All right, we have a question from Jeff Fisher. Who designed the artwork inside the shield?
That would be Alan, right?
Yeah.
Margaret?
Yes, I mean, he had big sheets with the drawings, and then what would happen is, first of all, those sheets would go up, and I don't know if there were little holes punched through, where charcoal was pounced, to get, I can't remember exactly how that was done, but, so they were transferred, just the outline, and then Alan would tell us, basically what colors, that were needed. And then he was doing the outlines afterwards with the brush. But yeah, I assume they're kind of classical, from what was, at the time, I assume. I'm saying like he didn't make it up,
Yeah. It was from what he found in history
Right.
and his research. Yeah,
Mhm.
exactly.
Mhm. When we have a comment from Dee Lester, our former director of education here at the Parthenon, I wanted to read it out loud to share it. And she writes, she led a tour of students from the Tennessee School of the Blind, and the gilders came down and let the kids feel some of the skewings, and they loved it and had gold all over their hands and faces and said they were just like statues. And so her takeaway was that those visitors knew and could, understand how thin the gold really was and what a delightful tour it was. So it sounds like you had some time to share the project along the way as well with visitors who came in. That's wonderful.
Yeah, I do remember that. I think my mom was there that day.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
That's a great comment. Thank you for that. Wonderful.
I see a comment from Mary Mark Monday who asks, wasn't the gold literally the treasury of Athens? And I can help answer that. Yes, in times of need, such as war, the gold from Athena was said to have been taken down and used to purchase, ships or military equipment when needed. So the good thing about gold leaf is I don't think you can do that here in Nashville. So we're safe.
Yeah.
Plus, you would have to scrape an awful lot off to make it worth,
Yes. And if folks have any final questions, comments, feel free to add those in. We'll ask just a couple more before ending and thanking our speakers. I have a question from Jane Stein in the Q&A, and she asks, what was the total cost of this project? Do you have any recollection?
I knew it one
used to
time.
know.
I do
You
not
mean the
remember
gilding or the making of Athena? It's also
Of the
gilding.
gilding and painting.
The
project.
one thing I do know is Mom always said we came in under budget and in on time. So that's a good thing.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I don't know what the budget was. I don't remember that.
We have an addition in the chat from Wesley Payne, the retired Parthenon director, who was director at the time of the project. And she added that her memory is that the scaffolding, and that includes renting, installing, etc., was as or more expensive than the gold.
Wow.
Wow.
I see
had no
that she
idea
said
about that. That's
Yeah.
amazing. Yeah.
And potentially around 175,000 to 190,000.
Yeah.
Wow.
I think the gilding budget, Mitch was saying, may have been around 100,000, something like
Or a little
that.
more. Yeah,
Maybe a
maybe
little more.
110, something like that, I believe.
Also, gold was a lot less expensive back then. Let me
Good
tell
point.
you, it's gone way up. Yeah.
Good point.
Yeah. So, and that was one of the things when Wesley, when Wesley and I were talking about the possibility of cleaning, we did check into the scaffolding again, and it was cost prohibitive. It was crazy expensive. It would be ridiculous. So yeah, even a simpler scaffolding.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yes, because this scaffolding, I remember one thing, it had stairs going up to the levels until you got to the very top when it was just rungs. But that made it just much more pleasant to like run up to a level, than climb up.
Well, we did some gilding on the Sturmerhorn, and a helper had to go up in the four corners, so it was 40 feet up ladder. I would not do it today.
No, remember, because I was working with you then too. And the thing at the Skimmerhorn was they had actually built total floors of scaffolding. There was an elevator that would go up to the different levels where you were right up against the ceiling. But you went up on that scissor thing, I
did go up on that, but also in the inside, after they had taken the flooring out, we had to go up in the corners, and it was 40 feet up. And I tell you what, I'm like, you go to the bathroom now, don't come down.
No, I wouldn't do it.
It was crazy. Yeah. So thank goodness for the stairs on the scaffolding.
The stairs were wonderful.
Yeah.
I will echo the words of Jane Stein in the Q&A, who says it was worth it. Exactly. Well, and I'm thinking of, speaking of the scaffolding, I saw, was it the size that had all the red oil paint added? And I do have a question about the red and the blue. I know that there was some blue for snakes, but was that difficult to to keep track of in terms of, spilling on the floor or carrying up scaffolding? Was that a consideration, or was that kind of just regular practice? Nothing
It
new
was,
at the
we
time.
were pretty
Yeah.
good. I think they covered,
Jars,
Yeah.
hold a jar and
and I don't remember anybody actually dropping any, big amount.
I don't either.
The base was covered, with
Mhm.
paper, that heavy duty paper, just in case, but it was
Good question, but I
Yeah.
really don't remember any accidents of
Yeah.
that nature. A jar falling from 40 feet up. Nope, didn't happen.
Look out
Or a
below.
person either,
Yeah.
Thank goodness. Yeah.
Yeah, I saw some of the harnesses
I know.
in those photos as
That's
well.
right. They were
Mhm.
heavy.
Could you talk a little bit about the choice of red and blue as some of the undertones on the statue? If I remember correctly, some of the snakes have some blue tones, perhaps like on her breastplate of armor.
Well, all the size was just red. And it was honestly just done to show where the size was. Red is a traditional undercoat color for gilding work. But it was gilded so heavily and so well that none of the red was intended to show through. And I don't
Right.
recall any
And
places
any
that I see it.
blue was really like painter's tape,
Mhm.
like under her eyes to prevent. And it might have been in some other places too that were tricky. Like when we were seeing her necklace, one of the things I think that I was commenting was that we had to, shellac and size all those little things without getting it on her skin, which was all through because that was going to be
Mhm.
painted. So there were some real, and on those sandals too, the little figures
Yeah.
on the sides, we had to go around those. But mostly we only used the tape, as I recall, under the eyes and stuff. But
Yeah.
I don't know where else blue would have been.
Yeah. All the size was just red, I believe. Yeah. Yeah.
All right, that's great to know. We have entered a call for any final questions or comments for tonight's symposium. So we'll give our audience, and our new guest speaker, I see.
As she keeps one of my cats, I'm outside on the porch and she
That's
keeps
wonderful. So feel free to take this time to enter any final questions or comments. While I give those folks a minute, I wonder if one thing that we always ask about for any high schoolers or college students or folks interested in this, what sort of classes or skills or interests help get started a career in gilding or, kind of something that's both scientific but artistic in this way?
Well, there's no real, there are a lot of gilders that teach. I would say that the best scenario would be to look up the Society of Gilders, which I've been a member of forever. I was vice president for a while. We have conferences every 2 years. We have one coming up in September, and they have great classes on many different disciplines of gilding. And there's a lot more than you think that there might be. There's a fellow from Chicago that does a wonderful class on book gilding, for the covers, for the edging. There's some beautiful glass gilders that do amazing work. What's the woman in New York? What is her name? She does amazing glass gilding work, which is an art that, a lot of people don't know
Mickey, I'm sorry.
It's very églamisé. So that's what I would suggest. And there's the website for the Society of Gilders, and you can find everything that's available basically from that.
And
Yeah.
like you said, with the internet, it's probably much easier to find hookups and stuff, because when we were doing it, like two of the people that came to help and oversee, Jean
Yeah. And
Smitty, they were both gilders.
Mhm.
Although I think Jean also did a restoration work,
She did too.
paintings and or frames and stuff like you do too.
Mhm.
But I would talk to them and they were like, yes, the Society of Gilders and stuff, which I never joined, but yeah, that was it,
Yeah.
Um,
it's probably the best resource for someone who wants to know. And, you'll get good information from there.
But going to the shop, your all's shop, and Lou giving us a class beforehand. I mean, I still have the little piece of thing that I gilded, that was a lot of fun. And she was a great teacher. I remember,
And I think that's a critical point you make, Margaret. It needs to be for someone who really wants to learn. And would a project like this come to that individual? Who knows? I mean, it might.
Yeah.
But who knows? But to learn from someone who has the experience and not just the skill, but not really a reference of work that they themselves have been a part of, so that they know so many of the ins and outs and things and what it takes to get it done right, and not to rush into it, but to study what has to be done before attacking it.
That's right.
So
that's
the
exactly.
Society of Gilders is the best place to start because of that, for that reason.
Yeah.
So
I mean,
I'll tell you one little story about another project we did with Alan on the music sculpture.
Oh, this is great.
Right.
I'll let Mitch tell it because it was just real quick.
Yeah, so we knew that at some point Alan was bringing from the foundry and from where he had the sections of the Musica statue. Hopefully everyone knows the Musica statue at the roundabout. And he said, be ready to help me gild the tambourine, and it'll be in a position where you can get to it. I'll make sure of it. So he calls one day and says, tomorrow we're going to be coming into Nashville with the things. Because of the laws with regard to big trucks like that, it had to come in late at night.
Right.
He said, but tomorrow afternoon we'll be in Clarksville, Tennessee. Here's where we'll be. Meet us there, and you can gild that tambourine for us before we ever drive into Nashville. And so we did, and we met him at a truck stop in Clarksville with about a 30-mile-an-hour wind going. And thankfully, we figured out a way to make our size work really quickly.
It was a quick size, and it was hot, so it dried really quickly.
Yeah, and if you look at this tambourine, this thing is huge. It's probably diameter of maybe 4 or 5 feet, something like that. Anyway,
like that.
It's hard to say.
Anyway,
but we got it gilded, and on the way from there, the media starts calling us, and they want to know where Alan is, because they know that this statue has been a very controversial thing because of its depiction of nudity. And so they're asking us where Alan is, and we're not telling them, we're not saying a word about it.
You'll have to call him for that.
And was such a great,
he left town after it was installed and went on vacation.
It was hilariously fun, and we just love working with him. And
we feel really privileged to have been able to work with him. My mom absolutely loved Alan.
She loved Alan,
and we really have, it's a treat, and it was a privilege to be able to do that for us all.
That was one of our funny stories. And that tambourine, you drive by there, it still looks great.
Yeah.
It probably has some bird poop up on top somewhere, but what I can see, it still looks great. And that was probably 18 years ago.
Yeah.
18 years ago. So,
yeah.
Anyway.
Absolutely wonderful. I love that story so much. Thank you for sharing it. We are getting some wonderful comments in the chat, so I will echo the thank yous from everybody in the chat and thank our presenters tonight, Mitch and Micki Cavanah, as well as Margaret, who was able to offer some wonderful stories and, of course, documentation of the project. I'd like to thank again our sponsors, Centennial Park Conservancy and the Archaeological Institute of America Nashville Society, for supporting our symposia series. I will do a shameless plug for our next symposium, which is in approximately 1 month on September 19th. It is called Pandora and Polychromy on the base of Athena Parthenos. So if you like gold on Athena, there is a fantastic scholar who has imagined the Pandora scene, as we referenced tonight, instead of gold, in color. So feel free to head on over to our website, NashvilleParthenon.com, and you can register for that talk on September 19th. Mitch and Micki and Margaret, thank you so much for this evening. I know we will see you again as you take care of all of our wonderful frames of our Cowan collection in the Parthenon. So
It's an ongoing treat.
yes, folks, feel free to come see their magnificent work on Athena, who is on display during our all museum hours we have. And you can also check out their work on the frames of the Cowan collection. So thank you very much for joining us this evening. Hope you
Thank
all
you,
have
Katie.
a wonderful night.
Pleasure.
Thanks everybody for logging in
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
watching too.
Thank you very much. Enjoyed it.
Thanks for watching. Be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel so you're the first to know about all the exciting things happening at the Nashville Parthenon.